Good afternoon, everybody. Parshat Chayei gives us great pleasure to, first of all, thank Evelyn and Mark for sponsoring the Dvar Torah. It is in honor of a very happy occasion, Baruch Hashem, a special birthday to Mark. So I want to wish you and Evelyn on behalf of the entire shul to have a lot of mazal tov and a lot of happiness and nachas on your special birthday. And indeed, mamash, you and your family should mamash continue to have a happy life together. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu yimalei kol mishalot libchem letovah. So mazal tov, and thank you very, very much for sponsoring the Dvar Torah of Chayei Sarah. As you can see, the title of the shiur, not shiur, the short Dvar Torah is what are the means and what is the thing that is most required for shiduchim. So I wanted to point out that something, first of all, that I've said many, many times in our recordings, and that is that the Torah writes about something in a context which is very, very strange. I don't want to go through. I think I brought 5 examples. I'll just give the one or two that I mentioned once before. Where does the Torah speak about the Isur, the prohibition against vandalism or to destroy something of worth? In all places, the Torah chose to emphasize that halacha in the laws of warfare. So dafka in the laws of warfare, where there is the most and the greatest amount of wanton destruction, the taking of lives and cruelty, dafka there, the Torah seeks to emphasize that besides war, or even in the time of war, one has to, b'chol ofen, if one can, and it doesn't interfere with military operations, so even then one has to then watch not destroy something just for the sake of destruction. And that is the way that the Torah many times emphasizes the importance of a certain matter. And the same thing, the Torah speaks about the obligation of burial, where dafka concerning a criminal who was executed because he cursed Hashem with Hashem's name. So dafka over there, when a person has lost, so to speak, all a sense of dignity that he was created in the image of God, and he curses chas v'chalila Hashem, so dafka there, the Torah emphasizes that when he's executed, yes, he has to be executed, but he has to be buried on the first day, on the same day, and not to delay his burial. So dafka over there, the Torah emphasizes how far the dignity of human being goes. Now, concerning shiduchim, it's fascinating that the Gemara on the one hand says that if there's one area where the Torah, where God, there are 3 partners in a person's life, his parents, his father, his mother, and God. And when it comes to shiduchim, the Torah says that here God is really the dominant player. He is the dominant partner. And the Torah, the Gemara in Masechet Sotah says it so sharply. The Torah says that, the Gemara, says that 40 days before conception, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's already a heavenly voice that goes out and says, the daughter of so-and-so will marry so-and-so. So we see what is the point of this bat call, this heavenly voice that goes out, wants to show us that already before a person has done anything in his life, already Hashem is already, so to speak, prepared and is already pulling strings and already going to bring about certain events that a person should get married, even though that it's a mitzvah for a person to get married. So therefore that means that the person has to do his, it's not a gzeira, it's not something that the person's got no free will. He has to do his share. But at the same time, Hashem is very, very much, as opposed to, or in contrast to all other areas of life, Hashem is going to help the person as much as possible. And if all things are going well, so then there's an ideal spouse and there's a not so ideal spouse. And that, of course, will depend on a person's action during his lifetime or her lifetime. And the Torah is like saying that if all things are equal, and this is the ideal match that Hashem is already machriz at the time of creation of the person. So isn't it amazing that when we look at the parasha, we see and we can observe the following just by looking at the parasha on even a superficial level. We see that Abraham went to such great effort and extent to buy a burial plot for his wife Sarah. And the Torah details the negotiations and the great nisayon, as Rabbeinu Yonah learned, that even though Hashem had promised Abraham everything, nevertheless, we see that he had to negotiate on something that really was his, and the enormous amount of money that he paid for the plot of land, so that there should be a separation between a Jewish burial plot and a non-Jewish burial plot, etc. But and all this is part of his holding onto Eretz Israel. And yet we don't find in the parasha that Abraham Avinu davened. We see that he did something, but we don't see that he davened. And yet, let's go to the next area, what the Torah speaks about, the area of shiduchim. Here we see the Torah emphasizes that the element and the factor of davening. We learn, number one, that the first, very clear, is a tremendous amount of davening that Eliezer did before going to Haran. He went to Haran, and then he arrives there just towards the afternoon. And what he does is, as it's a late afternoon, the Torah tells us about his prayers to Hashem. And the Torah, the Tefillah is answered almost immediately. The Torah emphasizes that Eliezer says, Ani terem edaber elubi, before I finish speaking to my heart. What an unbelievable expression that is. I was speaking to my heart. In other words, I was organizing my thoughts, my heart, my emotions, my devotion and my concentration, that my tefillah should be accurate to Hashem. No sooner did I finish, some of Parsha say no sooner did I finish like praising Hashem, before I even now had a chance to fully articulate my request, then already Raphael came out. Right, and then I went and I approached her. And then towards the end of the parasha, which is also not so clear, but Rashi already quotes from the Midrash that Yitzchak, when Eliezer and Rivka were returning from Haran, and they came to Eretz Israel, and Yitzchak was in the field, and he was coming from Be'er L'chai Ro'i. Rashi explains, what was he doing in the field? He was davening. And he used to daven always near a place of Be'er L'chai Ro'i, because that was like a special place where Hashem, the Malach, appeared to Hagar the first time, the second time. So it was a holy place. And this is where he would always go to daven. Every single time, he would go to daven. And what the Mefarshim and the Midrashim are trying to say is that, yes, Eliezer did his share in davening, but Yitzchak, what was his share in davening? He wasn't allowed to go out of Eretz Israel to find his shidduch. He had certain restrictions, because after the Akedah, he was like a malach, he was like an angel. He was so kadosh that Hashem said, "You never allowed to go out of Eretz Israel." And when there was, for example, a famine, unlike his father, unlike his son, Abraham and Yaakov were allowed to go down to Mitzrayim, Yitzchak was never allowed to leave Eretz Israel. So his father, on the one hand, said, you can't leave Eretz Israel. On the other hand, you can't get a shidduch from the people in Eretz Israel. It has to be from someone outside of Eretz Israel. So what's he going to do? So what he has to do is he has to daven. And when he davened in that afternoon, when he now davened and davened, no sooner did he daven, right, his wife appeared on the scene. So do you see the paradox? The paradox and the irony is like this, that dafki in the area where everything is so like almost set from the beginning of creation, everything is already set up. There's already a concept of hashgacha, a special divine providence, what we call in simple language a bashert. Dafka in that area, what is the Torah emphasizing? Davening. Davening, 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 davening is what everyone involved in the shiduchim has to do. To not to think that, what can I do? Or it's all been set up by Hashem already 40 days before even conception. That's how far the plan of Hashem is. And the Torah tells us now that, yes, it's correct, but the one thing that has to be emphasized so much more than in any other area, dafka in this area of where everything's planned, is that the human being has to daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that his shidduch will be revealed and that he'll be able to build a Beit Ne'eman b'Yisrael. Shabbat Shalom L'Kulam.